Imagine a life-sized human statue, carved 12,000 years ago, hidden sideways inside a stone wall. The head and torso are perfectly preserved, the feet missing. Hands folded over the belly, eyes seemingly watching from within. Officially, it's called a votive offering. But if it was meant to be hidden, what else could be sealed beneath the surface? And why would ancient builders go to such lengths to conceal it? Today we uncover Göbekli Tepe, one of the oldest monumental sites on Earth, a place where human history and mystery collide, and where the majority of the story is still buried, literally, beneath layers of stone and soil. Before we descend any deeper into these 12,000-year-old riddles, if you find this kind of historical mystery captivating, consider giving the video a like, hit the subscribe button, and tap the notification bell so you don't miss future explorations. It's free, takes a heartbeat, and the YouTube algorithm seems to adore engagement, almost as much as ancient architects adored limestone. Göbekli Tepe sits atop a limestone ridge in southeastern Turkey. Built during the pre-pottery Neolithic, roughly 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, it predates Stonehenge by thousands of years. The site is famous for its massive T-shaped pillars, intricately carved with foxes, vultures, snakes, and wild boars. And yet, human representations are astonishingly rare. Until 2025, no full human figure had been discovered embedded in the walls. Why does this matter? In a place dominated by animals and abstract symbols, the sudden appearance of a human statue, especially one deliberately concealed, raises urgent questions. Before we go further, I'd really like to hear your interpretation. Why do you think human imagery was so rare at Göbekli Tepe? And what might have compelled the builders to conceal a life-sized figure inside a wall? We sincerely welcome thoughtful, well-reasoned comments, and we make an effort to read as many as possible, so feel free to share your analysis. Who was it meant to represent? A deity, an ancestor, or something else entirely? In September 2025, during restoration work, archaeologists uncovered a life-sized limestone figure between structures B and D. It lay horizontally, head and torso intact, arms bent at the elbows, hands resting on the abdomen. The lower legs were missing, either intentionally removed or lost over millennia. Official statements called it a votive offering, a gift left for the gods. But this figure wasn't displayed openly like other artifacts. It was built into the wall itself, hidden from view. The act felt less like devotion and more like a deliberate entombment, an intentional choice to conceal. Mini payout. Even in a society that rarely carved humans, someone took the time to create a full-sized figure and tuck it away. It wasn't casual, it was meaningful. For nearly 20 years, the site's story was framed by Klaus Schmidt, the German archaeologist who brought Göbekli Tepe to global attention. Schmidt argued that the enclosures were deliberately buried around 8000 BCE, a funeral for a building. He described layers of stone rubble, animal bones, tools, and even fragments of human skulls carefully packed into the structures. According to Schmidt, this wasn't abandonment, it was a ritual act to close and retire sacred spaces, similar to practices seen in Catalhoyuk, another Neolithic site. For decades, Schmidt's interpretation became the standard. His certainty shaped textbooks, documentaries, and museum displays. Almost no one publicly questioned him. After Schmidt's death in 2014, new archaeologists revisited decades of excavation records. Moritz Kinzel, an expert in architectural stratigraphy, noticed something important. The layers weren't uniform. Some walls showed bulging, tilting, and partial collapse. Fill layers were patchy, layered, and sometimes disrupted by small landslides. Answer: instead of a single coordinated burial, Göbekli Tepe may have been sealed gradually. Natural erosion, wall collapses, and occasional human intervention all played a role. Mini payout. The old certainty cracked. What we once called a funeral for a building could actually be a combination of human and natural processes. Today, only 10% of the site has been excavated. Ground-penetrating radar and magnetometry reveal at least 20 large enclosures still buried under the mound. Some are circular, echoing the known structures above. Others are rectangular, larger than domestic buildings, completely underground. Could they hold undiscovered answer? The water systems indicate long-term planning, whether for practical needs, ritual purification, or symbolic purposes. Mini payout. These aren't simple rain catchments. They're evidence of a society capable of large-scale engineering and foresight. The curated debris inside the enclosures tells a story. Thousands of flint blades, carved vessels, animal bones, and fragments of human skulls have been found. Some skulls bear drilled holes and deep grooves, evidence of a skull cult, where heads were displayed or manipulated after death. Answer: Gobekli Tepe wasn't merely ceremonial, it was a controlled cultural space, where objects and remains were intentionally arranged. Mini payout. Human intervention is visible everywhere. This was a society with rituals and possibly strict rules about what went where. When it comes to why Gobekli Tepe was buried, scholars no longer speak in a single voice. Instead, three main theories dominate the debate, each offering a different lens and each leaving questions unanswered. 1. Ritual retirement. Some researchers argue that the builders of Gobekli Tepe intentionally buried the structures as a form of sacred closure. Much like Neolithic houses at Çatalhöyük were sometimes ceremonially retired. These monumental enclosures may have been sealed to honor their sacred purpose or mark the end of a ritual cycle. This theory treats burial as a deliberate cultural act, a way to preserve the sanctity of the site for posterity. Yet, questions linger. Why go to such lengths for massive stone structures? And why are some enclosures left partially exposed, while others vanish almost entirely beneath rubble? 2. Spiritual containment. A second perspective frames the burial as a form of spiritual or symbolic containment. Perhaps the enclosures and their carvings held power that needed to be controlled, dangerous if left open. In this reading, the act of sealing becomes protective, both for the living and for the monuments themselves. Some point to the life-sized human figurine embedded in a wall as evidence of a culture deeply concerned with channeling or restraining forces they considered potent. Yet, the theory raises its own mysteries. If containment was the goal, why is the placement inconsistent? And why are there signs of human intervention mixed with natural debris? 3. Natural collapse. Finally, there's a more practical explanation. Erosion, gravity, and structural failure may have done much of the work. Walls slumped, sediment washed in, and over millennia, a hilltop exposed to the elements accumulated layers of rubble. Proponents of this theory highlight stratigraphic evidence of partial collapses, mixed layers of soil and stone, and pockets of debris inconsistent with a single, coordinated act of burial. Still, the sheer volume of curated material, animal bones, carved fragments, and human remains suggests more than random collapse. None of these theories fully explains everything. Each has gaps, contradictions, or unanswered questions. But together, they suggest a complex interplay of human decisions and natural forces. The builders were not working in isolation from their environment, and time itself has left its mark on their creation. The story of Gobekli Tepe's burial is likely multi-layered, episodic, and nuanced, resisting any neat, singular explanation. What makes the site endlessly compelling is this resistance to simplicity. Its secrets refuse to yield to a single theory, and every new discovery, whether a carved pillar, a hidden chamber, or a fragment of bone, adds another layer of intrigue. For scholars and visitors alike, the mystery is part of the experience. Gobekli Tepe is a puzzle that invites curiosity, speculation, and wonder, reminding us that sometimes the questions are as important as the answers. Today, archaeologists at Gobekli Tepe face a delicate balancing act. On one hand, the site is incredibly fragile. Exposing centuries-old stone carvings and enclosures to wind, rain, and human traffic can cause irreversible damage. That's why modern teams prioritize preservation over full-scale excavation. Only areas at immediate risk, where walls are collapsing or erosion threatens the structures, are actively worked on. The rest of the site remains buried, stable, and largely unexplored. Funding for this work comes from a mix of government support and corporate sponsorship. Groups like Turkey's Dogus conglomerate have poured money into visitor centers, protective shelters, and pathways for tourists. On paper, this is about heritage management and education, giving the public access without damaging the site. But some critics argue that this focus on tourism and infrastructure can slow real archaeological progress, limiting excavation to only what is immediately necessary, which raises a question we can't ignore. Is the inaccessibility purely for protection? Or are some of the site's deepest secrets being kept from public view? Could the most extraordinary discoveries, hidden chambers, rare artifacts, or clues about the people who built Gobekli Tepe remain buried, intentionally or inadvertently? According to official statements, every decision is guided by long-term preservation. Exposing fragile structures too soon can lead to decay that might never be reversed. Archaeologists also hope that future technology, more precise excavation tools, advanced imaging, or climate-controlled digs will allow safer study of the buried sections. Still, the reality is that 90% of Göbekli Tepe remains unexcavated, meaning centuries-old mysteries, from human figurines entombed in walls to unusual arrangements of stones and bones, remain unsolved. What's revealed and what stays hidden is not only a matter of archaeology, it's also a matter of choice. The decisions of today's authorities shape the story of Göbekli Tepe for generations. Every path cleared, every wall reinforced, every chamber left untouched dictates what the world sees and what we may never know. In other words, the hilltop isn't just a window into the past. It's a stage on which human curiosity, caution, and control collide. Even as the site welcomes tourists and researchers alike, the largest and most mysterious enclosures remain buried, mapped only by radar and remote sensing. They are reminders that in archaeology, sometimes what we don't dig up tells as much of a story as what we do. And at Göbekli Tepe, that story is far from complete. Some of Göbekli Tepe's T-shaped pillars may encode astronomical knowledge, pointing to events in the sky that ancient humans observed thousands of years ago. One of the most discussed ideas involves the Younger Dryas, a sudden and dramatic climate shift around 12,000 years ago that plunged parts of the world into near glacial conditions. Researchers like Martin Sweatman have suggested that the animal carvings, vultures, scorpions, foxes, and even headless humans might correspond to constellations and celestial events. For example, Pillar 43, often called the Vulture Stone, is argued to depict a cosmic timeline, a kind of prehistoric astronomical calendar marking this climatic upheaval. The theory is controversial. Some experts argue the correlations are cherry-picked, pointing out that patterns can be found in any set of symbols if you look hard enough. Others note that Neolithic people were sophisticated observers of the sky, tracking stars, the moon, and seasonal changes. So it's plausible that astronomical knowledge was encoded in the site. Even if the exact alignments aren't proven, the possibility that Göbekli Tepe was more than a ritual site, that it also held celestial significance, adds a whole new dimension to our understanding. These carvings may not just reflect life on Earth. They could be a cosmic map, a warning, or a record of events that affected our ancestors profoundly. Imagine walking among these pillars, knowing the people who built them may have been watching the stars with the same wonder we feel today. Were they documenting the heavens, predicting events, or connecting the Earth to the cosmos in ways we are only beginning to comprehend? Göbekli Tepe might not just be earthly, it could also be celestial, a monument that reaches beyond stone and time into the very fabric of the sky. Göbekli Tepe remains one of humanity's greatest enigmas. Deliberate human planning, mysterious rituals, and carefully engineered structures tell us this was not just a temple, it was a statement. Grand payout, 90% of the site remains buried. What secrets are waiting beneath the soil? Human statues, tools, bones, or evidence of lost knowledge? Rehook. Every wall, every enclosure, every stone could hold a story we've yet to understand. Sometimes what we don't dig up says more than what we do. Mini payout. As technology advances and conservation continues, Göbekli Tepe will slowly reveal its secrets. But for now, it keeps us asking questions, challenging assumptions, and staring in awe at the ingenuity of people 12,000 years ago.